The SIGAR report, Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, government organization that's produced tremendous reports on what really happened in Afghanistan. Last week, we talked about trying to implement democratic institutions like courts and elections in a system like that. Failed miserably. So what we were doing, in addition to overemphasis on democracy, was over-reliance on money. And $1 trillion, 85% was military, but that's $150 billion on infrastructure, rebuilding. We spent $1 billion trying to establish a court system, $9 billion on opium eradication. We just spent a ton of money. And let me just give you, as we've been doing in all of these segments, some of the quotes from SIGAR that I find to be fascinating. So give the American people, the taxpayer, an idea of what was happening with the money. Quote from SIGAR: as one senior USAID official told us, the strategy was money equals success. However, the notion that the reconstruction problem was a mere money spigot to be turned on demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the U.S. government's ability to harness any torrent of resources arriving in Afghanistan. The money spent was far more than Afghanistan could absorb. Another quote real quick: by spending money faster than can be accounted for, the U.S. government ultimately achieved the opposite of what it intended. It fueled corruption, delegitimized the Afghan government, and increased insecurity. And let me expand on that point for a second. It delegitimized the Afghan government because this money would then end up in you and I love the word, the warlords, would end up in the hands of the warlords who are working against the legitimacy of the Afghan government. Probably a lot of this money ended up in the hands of the people who now call themselves Taliban. So we're spreading money around, but we're making segments of the society that are opposed to the Afghan government wealthier and more powerful. Let me give you a couple of numbers. In 2021, SIGAR audited a sample of 60 U.S. infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, and it found that 723 million, or 91% of the money spent in these projects, had gone toward assets that were unused or abandoned, were not used as intended, had deteriorated, were destroyed, or some other combination of the above. That's one study they did. Here's another one. Quote: a 2021 SIGAR report found that the United States had spent nearly $7.8 billion on capital assets in Afghanistan, including buildings, transmission lines and substations, roads and bridges, motor vehicles and aircraft. Of that total, nearly 31%, $2.4 billion, was spent on assets that were not being used as intended, remained unused, or had been abandoned or destroyed. So it's basically two separate studies of the same thing. And the numbers, 91% or even 31%, were just throwing money at things and having no impact. And let me just give one more specific example. In 2008, USAID awarded a contract for the design and construction of 2 hospitals. However, the annual operating and maintenance costs of the new hospitals were many times of the hospitals they were intended to replace. SIGAR found that USAID began construction on the hospital a year before they even shared the plans with the Afghan Ministry of Public Health. SIGAR also found that the Afghan government was unable to fund the maintenance for the roads that the U.S. constructed. And even if it had the funding, it lacked the technical capacity to do so. For one group of U.S. power sector projects, SIGAR found that the agencies involved failed to even estimate how much operations and maintenance would be. Unsurprisingly, the Afghan government has proven unable to sustain them. So hospitals, roads, power projects, we're building them without considering whether or not they can be sustained by the Afghan government. So we choked them with money, and in so doing, we delegitimized the government and probably facilitated the growth of the agents that we are now trying to contend with, who are opposed to our involvement.
Well, Dan, those are stunning. I mean, those are the type of things that people hear, read about, and hopefully get upset. It's not our first rodeo doing that, Dan. And